we watched live on this channel, well, with a lot of pausing. I was told by the people who rated in from Hutch and other channels, Lonerbox, Dylan, you paused it a lot. Well, if you don't like me pausing and you don't want the commentary, just go to CBS and watch the live stream, okay? Anyway, I just don't understand. This is the thing that gets me. When people are in chat and they're reacting to something and you pause to give commentary, like, why are you pausing some? Is it that you just want a friend to watch the debate with? Is it that you're lonely and that you don't want to watch the original stream? Because if that's the case, okay, go find a mukbang guy who's going to react to the debate. Don't watch my channel. Anyway, we have some polling data that I wanted to break down because the only data we had in the immediate aftermath was one sample group from the Washington Post. And the sample group was all over the place. The sample group of like 13, 14 something people. I forget, maybe we've been 20 in the upper echelons. I forget how many people it was. On one side, they were saying that, you know, JD Vance did very poorly in the section on abortion and Walz curb stomped them. But then they threw a curveball out there and they said, well, actually, not only did JD Vance do better on immigration, which I expected, but JD Vance did better on the issue of climate change. In the section where he wouldn't directly answer whether or not he thought climate change was real, he did best on the issue. Really? That's like saying, okay, I think he had the best position on inflation, and somebody asked him, is inflation real? Well, no matter your position on the inflation question, you know, here are some facts. It's a little strange. So these sample polling, these samples polls of like independent voters and swing state voters that they drag out after these debates, they're immediate. They are not a very large sample size, and they just have to do with the 20 people that they've gathered into a room, which is obviously not going to be representative of the country, especially since the sample size they did was just swing voters. And so I wanted to check out post-debate favorability polling. I wanted to check out some performance polling. I wanted to check out what I think is the most important data, and that's how well, not the most, but one of the most pieces of important data, which is how they did with independents and just how they overall performed, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is the just general performance. Who did better in the debate? Well, to be quite frank with you, my immediate stance was that it was a wash, that they both were about dead even. They were about 50-50, that at the start, Walz was extremely nervous. He stumbled and JD Vance started hard. I think at the end, Tim Walz did much better. He performed better in the second half. Tim Walz had some slip-ups, whether it had to do with the nervous answer about Hong Kong and not answering directly, or if you go on the other side, you could talk about JD Vance not answering the question about climate change directly, dodging the question about whether Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, which of course is being clipped and shipped by the Harris campaign a lot right now. There was the moment where JD Vance, for whatever reason, decided to talk about Springfield, Ohio, and lie about it again, suggesting that illegals had brought up the prices of housing in Springfield and all these problems, Springfield illegals, even though the people there are legal. And so there's like a quick moment when one of the moderators like says, to clarify, the people in Springfield, Ohio are here legally. They're legal immigrants. The community in Springfield, the Haitian community of Springfield, has had bomb threats called against it. Many of the Haitian children are no longer sent to school because they're scared of how they're going to be treated, what could happen to their kids. They're getting harassed. Their properties are getting vandalized. They're getting intimidated. And I'm seeing multiple times the Trump campaign coming out calling for the deportation of these people, even though they're here completely legally. They're working at businesses and they're paying above average rates for the properties. So, I mean, like, they have every right to be here. And it doesn't seem that the problem with the Trump-Vance ticket, which, I mean, the problem that I was sold is we just want legal immigration. Okay, here's legal immigration. No, screw that, true. They eat cats, right? And when that conversation came up, he decides to lie about it again. She clarifies. And then Vance says the line, I was told there was going to be no fact checking. Now, look. That is true that the campaign said that there wasn't going to be no fact checking. But if everyone knows it's a lie, because everyone does, because it's been covered so heavily, you know, even JD Vance himself acknowledged it was a lie. But once acknowledging that the story was a lie after, you know, journalists hunt down the evidence that he presented, which was a police report, that ended up being retracted because the woman actually ended up finding her cat in her basement. She just lost it and then blamed her Haitian neighbors. He then said, well, you know, maybe I had to make up a story to bring people to a real issue, but that's what I'm going to have to do to bring attention to a real issue. So he was principally lying, you know, how religious zealots do and trying to recruit for their cults, you know, faiths and such. And he didn't expect to get confronted. He didn't expect somebody to make some hay out of it. If not the moderators, then Tim Walz or the people afterwards. And then he engages her. Not smart, in my opinion. But I think that they had a lot to agree on. They agreed a lot, much more relative, of course, relative to the main ticket. They both came off as civilly as possible. And at the end of the day, I think it was it was a wash. And we do have some data showing that it, generally speaking, was a wash, except for some key data points. So look at this. Who won the VP debate? This is from Politico. Who do you think won? Democrats, 72% say Walz. Republicans, 71% say J.D. Vance.
Burns is an
other
morally.
So we're talking,
bankrupt
you know, independents. We're talking, you know, people who are not Republicans or Democrats, people who would be outside the party, outside the big tents. Ignoramus 93, thank you so much for the primer. It has 34% for Walz and 25% for JD. 41% did not watch. So it seems of the other, Walz did perform better. Regardless of whether you watch the debate, who do you think would be a better vice president? 92% of Democrats said Tim Walz. 91% of Republicans said J.D. Vance, so it's pretty partisan there. You go into other, 44% says Tim Walz, 36% says J.D. Vance, 20% says I do not know. So that is still an 8-point gain for Tim Walz in this category. And for the people who watched it in the other category, you know, the independent category, they seem to be behind Tim Walz. Now, if we want to see this data clearer, and I think this is a really important data point for Tim Walz, and his team should be happy about this, we got to go look at the independents. Let's go look it down here at the independents. I wanted to check out the independents. Here it is. Walz again had the advantage among independents. 44% preferring him as vice president versus 36% choosing Vance. So the other we're talking about here is independents. This is important. These are when we're talking about such a close race, even though these VP debates end up meaning very little, you could try to make it mean more. I think Democrats should lean into the fact that Donald Trump is the oldest nominee in American history. So it makes sense that you would talk about who could replace him, and that person saying, you know, rape is regrettable when talking about, you know, children and others having to carry to term the babies that were fetuses that were produced through rape, or many of his other wild and crazy statements from times past. In talking about that, plus his lack of experience replacing someone like Donald Trump, somebody who has advocated in J.D. Vance for a federal abortion ban. Or you could look at any of the other crazy stuff he said online. Much of it is still being revealed. Wait a week. I'm sure the Kamala Harris campaign will drip feed us even more, because they have been doing that on JD. We have some other pieces of data here that I wanted to check out. Here we go. Here is post-debate favorability, which has reasons for both sides to be happy. JD Vance, let's start with him. He saw an 11-point boost in favorability. Now, that means that before this debate, he had 31% favorability rating. Now, he still has a net negative favorability rating here. If you look, it's 41% favorable, 44% unfavorable. So he has a net negative favorability rating. But before, it was like net negative double digits. Now it's net negative single digits. Okay, not as bad. Not as bad. But when you compare it to the alternative, which is Tim Walz, who has improved his favorability polling further, now at 59% favorable with a 13-point jump, slightly bigger with 22% having an unfavorable position on him. So Tim Walz probably has more reason to be happy. He had a bigger jump. He has a higher favorability rating. The majority of people like him, nearly 60%. And that unfavorability rating of 22% is very low for somebody running for elected office. I mean, JD Vance started from rock bottom. He was the most unpopular VP pick in a very long time. No, I think it was like an 80 or 90, an crazy amount of time. And I think ever since we started doing polling, and it had to do with the fact that his campaign got off to the wrong foot. The Democrats, right when he jumped out, they had a million different things to throw at him. And they opened fire quick. People were hearing about his childless cat ladies. People were hearing about his stance on abortion, when Democrats and a lot of independents were already heavily motivated on the issue. So there's reason for both sides to be happy. More reason for Tim Walz's side to be happy. Here is something that's interesting and shows how dug in people are. Did the debate affect the presidential choice? Changed mind. For Harris voters, 1%. For Trump supporters, 1%. So when we have a margin of error of 7.8%, basically nobody changed their mind in their camps, and it's impossible to say because that's just such a gigantic margin of error. Reconsidering. Now this is interesting to me. This is the only part of this is interesting. 8% of Harris voters are reconsidering. 14% of Trump supporters are reconsidering. 14% of Trump supporters. What could be the things that are making a larger amount of Trump supporters reconsider than Harris supporters? Could it be when JD Vance was confronted on the fact that he doesn't believe that Trump lost the 2020 election and that he would not certify an election that Donald Trump lost, at least in my purview, from the way he's answered questions, that seems to be the case. He said that he wouldn't have certified the 2020 election where Donald Trump lost, where all 50 states certified the results, where they brought it the case over 60 times and lost. He had his day in court, lost, couldn't take it, kept going, made the fraudulent electors plot. When the people stormed the Capitol, his boys like Rudy were still calling people, trying to get them to overturn the election, even though it was not in the vice president's constitutional purview. Maybe that affected it. Maybe JD Vance was not as convincing on the issues as we think, looking at it from like a debate pro view. And this is something that I need to get across, because I saw some people like, oh, he wrecked him here, he wrecked him there. They were pretty cordial up there. I don't think anyone really got like wrecked, quote unquote, except for the one time like JD got his mic muted. Anytime you get your mic muted, it's not a good experience. I could say that as a moderator and watching people react to getting their mic muted. You guys see Andrew Wilson reacting to that hippy dippy? My God. Anyway, it seems that more Trump supporters are reconsidering on this poll. Massive margin of error, again, 7.8%, but more Trump supporters are reconsidering. Now, I will also say, even though the immediate aftermath was very cordial, people were a lot nicer during that debate, this is JD Vance about right after.
Now, it's funny because, we did this debate, and then I talked to the president afterwards, and we talked a little bit about, what actually happened, and, some of the points that I made, some of the points that Governor Walz made, and he made this observation. He said that Tim Walz said that he was friends with school shooters twice. And that's something I actually didn't notice, that Tim Walz had said that on the debate stage. And I said, did he really say that, sir? And he said, I'm telling you, man, go and watch the clips. He said he was friends with school shooters twice. And I said that was probably only the third or fourth dumbest comment Tim Walz made that night then. Because look, I got to be honest, I feel a little bad for Governor Walz. And
the thing that gets me about this is these types of slip-ups happen all the time on Team Trump. Trump was like, he misnames the states that he's in. He's gotten JD Vance's name on the campaign trail while endorsing JD Vance. He's gotten his name wrong. He gets information wrong all the time. Now, JD Vance, in the heat of a debate that everyone knew he was nervous from, he was acting nervous during the debate, says he's trying to say he's friends of the families of school shooting victims, and then says school shooters, and then everybody ran with it. And I just want to make an observation. Number one, I think it's going to be hard for JD Vance to keep the favorability boost that he has if he's immediately going to drop the nice guy act right when the debate is over. Just saying. Number two, nobody wanted the policy discussion. This was the most policy-oriented vice presidential debate or just debate on the presidential ticket I've seen in forever, where I was mostly from like Tim Walz the whole time, and this made sense. I was hoping they were going to do this in the pre-debate talking that we were doing on stream. I was asking for this. I want them to push the opportunity economy. Don't make it a vague generality. Talk about what that means in actuality for people. Talk about the tax credits. Talk about the down payments for first-time home buyers and what that could mean. Talk about the other opportunities that they're going to provide people in investment for housing and otherwise. Talk about what they're going to do when it comes to any number of issues. And the thing that I liked about Tim Walz being the one to push this is Tim Walz is in his state somebody who was able to pass a lot of legislation with a very divided House and Senate. It was a very slim majority, and he was able to get it through. He was able to get it through with a slim majority. And if the Democrats win the House and the Senate in November, it will be with a slim majority. So having somebody up there making the case for this opportunity economy who got a lot of stuff done in his home state, like free school lunches, massive investments into housing infrastructure, he got this done with that slim majority. So it feels like a legislator with over 20 years of experience against a two-year senator who's passed nothing in the Senate, talking about economics and implementation. Like, he could sell that well. I've done it in my state. This is what we want to do. Let's talk policy specifics because we weren't able to much during the main ticket. And that's what these vice presidential debates are all about. It's about pushing the main ticket, because as much as it might be interesting for us to watch Tim Walz and JD Vance go at it and think about either of these men being a heartbeat away from the presidency, almost every voter votes based on the top of the ticket. Now, voters should vote more based on the administration around the ticket. If JD Vance is chirping and Donald Trump's ear, that could have an effect. Part of the reason JD Vance was chosen, according to some reports, is that his sons were pushing Donald Trump to go with JD. They thought he was the right choice. I disagree if you want Trump to win, but they thought he was the right choice. And it is often reported by people who knew Trump that he is somebody who often listens to the last person in the room, and he can be quite easily influenced, putting aside the debate he took during the last debate. And so I think the administration matters, but sadly, that's not how voters vote. That is not how voters vote. I've seen, the Democratic Party, in a way, try to make that part of it by pushing Project 2025 so much, and a lot of that has to do with appointing MAGA loyalists. But that very little of that is by pointing at specific MAGA loyalists. It's more about the plans of the project. So yes, again, people vote mainly for the head of the ticket, for the presidential candidate, not the administration around them. So they should be focusing on pushing the head of the ticket. Defining themselves to the audience is okay, but they need to push the head of the ticket. Also, if you're worried if he is still not willing to answer the question about who won the 2020 election, yeah, of course.
Why didn't you answer the question last night during the debate about who won the 2020 presidential election?
Well, look, here's the simple reason.
Listen to that yelling from the crowd. How dare you ask that? How dare you question the truth of who won? So rowdy.
Is obsessed with talking about the election of 4 years ago. I'm focused on the election of 33 days from now because I want to throw Kamala Harris out of office and get back to common sense economic policies. But I also think you can believe that America needs to have secure and free elections, but also talk about the fact that just a couple of weeks ago, Democrats in the U.S. Congress blocked a piece of legislation that would have ensured illegal aliens don't vote in our elections. If you believe in American democracy...
Yeah, it was the We Want Pablo from Guatemala to Vote Act. I remember that. It was like all the illegals can vote now.
If you believe in our constitutional republic...
Look, the argument the Democrats made was that the legislation that they're talking about to block this is already the law of the land. Why pass it? That was their argument.
You should be trying to...
Anyway, look, can I just say quickly, I'm sick of this argument about J6. I'm sick of this argument about the election. Oh, it was 4 years ago. It was 4 years ago. Then why are people talking about Harris's, like, any of her record? How can you talk about any of her record as time of and when she was DA, when she was a prosecutor, her time in the Senate? How can you talk about someone's record if at any point they could just defend themselves by saying, oh, that's in the past? Hey, it says here that's, Bob Menendez, who's running for president now, had this big corruption scandal where he took gold bars. Well, like, that's the past. I'm not worried about the gold bars they took from Egypt. I'm worried about the gold bars I can take from Sudan now. Like, it's the future. Like, you could do this with any issue. Any issue. Excuse me, sir. I don't think that voting for Cuomo is a great idea for president, considering what happened. Oh, no, that's in the past. Hey, let's talk about, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And no, that's in the past. We can't talk about that. We're talking about the future now. Let's talk about the withdrawals from other countries. It's silly. It's silly. They would not apply this logic to any other issue. It's just the only way to defend Trump is by changing the topic on this issue. They can't discuss it. They can't discuss the fraudulent electors. They can't discuss what he did to the Secretary of State of Georgia and what he threatened to do to the Secretary of State of Georgia. They can't discuss how Donald Trump sat on his ass for 3 hours, sipping Diet Coke, watching the riots unfold while his boy is calling. They're calling the Capitol. They're calling the people on the Hill with Mike Johnson scurrying around trying to overturn the election results, using the violence to their advantage to try to overturn the election unconstitutionally. And if you talk about the facts of the case, you talk about those facts, and we're going to get more facts soon because more information is being laid out by prosecutors. But when you get the facts of the case, it's damning. It's very damning. And so the only arguments you have is either A, well, the guardrails are so strong that it doesn't really matter, while J.D. Vance himself, one of the guardrails in question, is saying he will not be a guardrail next time. Or B, you just don't talk about it. You just can't talk about it. And that's why he's shifted it to, well, on Twitter, my friends got banned. Who gives a fuck? We're talking about the president of the United States actually overturning an election result. This is on a totally different level of one of your friends or somebody getting banned off Facebook. It might find it be nice, and we might not agree with TOS or how they're managing everything. But at the end of the day, this is a totally different level. He's a president of the United States. Okay? I want to hold him to a higher standard than Facebook moderation. As for Tim Walz, his response to the Hong Kong question and his response to the school shooters quote was given to reporters during a campaign stop, and he's still as nervous as ever about it. It seems that like these types of questions is not where he performs best. He needs to get quick and snappy with the answers and then move on. You don't kind of wander around the issue with long pauses, because the long pauses make you look nervous. It makes it look like you have something to hide. Even if that's not the case, it's probably his nerves acting up like anybody else would, going from the governor of Minnesota to being covered by every single news agency in the country and in the world.
Well, thank you all. New York City was a little crazy last night, so good to see you all. Great to be here in Pennsylvania. Awful lot of teachers there, so really excited. So,
do you want to clarify the comments that you made about school shooters?
Yeah, and look, you got to see me. These folks know me. I'm super passionate about this. The question come up about school shooters.
Hey, look,
talking about everything except.
It's John Fetterman back there. It was almost impossible to see the lumbering giant, the Gachali green giant walking by.
Well, shootings, and
he could I almost missed him. It's impossible to spot him in a crowd.
I sat as a member of Congress with the Sandy Hook parents, and it was a profound movement. David Hogg is a good friend of mine. You have seen me do this. I was talking about being people where there are school shooters, and I need to be more specific on that, but I am passionate about this. This one, for my wife and I, is just, as teachers, as parents, is so personal. So I've become good friends with these Parkland students, and of course the Sandy Hook parents, who I credit and thank them for a profound change in how I viewed we have to make this happen. So. Yeah, look, I have my dates wrong. I was in Hong Kong and China in 1989.
See, this is how he should have led on the question. At least he gets it now.
That move.
See, it's those pauses. Oh, he's just trying to think of how to phrase it so he doesn't phrase it wrong. But
Hong Kong into China. It was profound for me. That was the summer of democracy. I said it's where I understood how sacred democracy.
He's also right about the summer, because it wasn't just the Tiananmen Square protest wasn't like one day of protest and they all got shot. It was a long series of protests and dissent that grew and grew and grew and grew and grew.
Democracy was. It's what encouraged me, about 15 back and forth with my students, taking them to China to understand both, first of all, the culture, but also to teach Chinese students about democracy. That was part of it. I was one of the first group of high school students. There weren't a lot of times that there were high school teachers in there that you could teach in a Chinese high school. And so you've seen me, these teachers see me, I speak like everybody else speaks. I need to be clearer, I will tell you that, but here's my whole point on that.
Okay, you get the idea. Somebody gave me 500 bits with the question, Dylan, to be fair to you, I honestly thought it was a parody or fake account at first, but nope, I saw Trump's official account post on X about you. Can we at least know what you actually believe? Or was it all just lies? You were the reason why I got so involved in Ukraine. I'm so disappointed over this news. What's next? You're gonna do the Blaze and abandon the left now that the jig is up? No, of course not. It's going to be OAN, okay? I'm only going to join a real patriotic news network like One America News, okay?
Burns is
Thank you very much.
Morally corrupt.
I don't want to join those rhinos over at the Blaze. Okay, we'll move back and forth, back and forth. We'll give you a little bit of what you need, and then a little bit of what you want, and then a little bit of what you need, and then a little bit of what you want.